Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. Uh, Welcome back after the weekend. Welcome if you're new to the channel. Let's see if the sound is doing what I'm hoping it's doing right now, which is coming out of both headphones right now. So let me know in the chat if that's the case. If you are listening on the headphones, I've tested it many times this morning, so I think we're good to go. But just to be sure, just let me know if you are listening through headphones, if it's coming out of both speakers. That would be really awesome to know. I'm pretty sure it is. So welcome back. Welcome if you're new to this channel. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you, and welcome back after the weekend. Whew. Wow. Yeah, we have a lot to talk about today, and I will do my best to give you the cliff notes of something that is really only knowable through our own intuition, to be perfectly honest. But we'll talk about the intuitive message that came through today with the this daily medicine transmission. We'll talk about the astrology for today. It is the third quarter moon squaring the sun. The sun is in conjunction with Alpha Draconis. I talked about this in the fourth lunar quarter astrology report. You can catch that on YouTube, BitChute, and Odysee. Whatever platform you're watching this on, you're going to find that astrology report. And I talked a lot about the astrology of this past weekend. I talked about the Draco Activation, and it's becoming certainly much more important and relevant with this Draco starseed activation. And I've talked a lot about the Draco starseeds and the primary goal, and the reason that Dracos are here is so that we can alchemically transmute that serpent medicine to its highest order. And I say we because I have very strong Draco starseeds in my chart. So we're gonna go over this transmission in just a moment here, but I do want to share that last week, like the following week prior, I had finished. I was coming into the last week of my own metamorphosis cycle. I was doing 21 days of Reiki attunements and mostly master attunements, and that last week was a very substantial but incredibly challenging time for me because I had all of these really strong physical symptoms coming to the surface that just were not abated by anything. Even when I broke down and tried to utilize more allopathic remedies because it was so painful and it was so just overwhelming at times how painful it felt. Like every joint in my body was on fire. My head was pounding. A headache that I haven't had in a really, really long time. And nothing, even the attunements and even giving myself Reiki on a regular basis was really not doing anything to necessarily take away my symptoms. It certainly was helping me move through the process gracefully. And the only real relief that I was getting was going into the ocean with all of the salt, right? With all of the salt clearing away the energy. I was taking cell salts like crazy. I also was taking activated charcoal and assisting my gut biome to get toxins out of my system before they even got into my system. I mean, so much of our immune system is in our gut, and the immune cells are in our gut. This is why in Ayurvedic medicine, the digestion is the primary focus of all health and wellness, right? According to Ayurveda, disease starts in the gut. It starts through the digestion. So if your digestive fire is weak, if you are not assimilating your and not only assimilating, but processing toxins out of your digestive system before it even gets into the rest of your body. This is where disease really starts to take root. And so I was supporting my system with activated charcoal. And if you're not familiar with that, it acts as like a binding agent for all kinds of toxicity in the gut and brings it out through your digestive system. And so even with all of those things, it was just it was just a purification by fire, almost literally, like I said. And the only thing that was really giving me any relief in the moment was going into the ocean water. And as soon as I would come out of it, everything would kind of flare back up. And then one day, towards the end of the attunement, once it was over, it just all cleared away. And it went back to normal, whatever that is. And I wrote a lot about that on my social media. I tracked it every day for those 21 days, so you can check that out. And you can link to those social media sites through the description box below, so either Telegram or Facebook. And I tracked every single day of that process, so you can get an idea of what that was like. Now, the reason I'm sharing this right now is because I've had reports from several people over the last week having the same type of symptoms over the last week. Their joints, all of their joints flaring, headaches that are not consolable at all. People, going to bed with headaches, waking up with a headache, their bodies just feeling like they're on fire, they're down to their bones, right? And I certainly felt this as well. And just going through it. And then very spontaneously within the last day or so, some measure of, just clearing up, right? Either having a physical experience where it seems like something popped and all of a sudden, like energy moving through the body very quickly, very swiftly, very strongly, right? It's kind of like a dam breaking, where it's been built, it's been held back for so long, and then the dam breaks finally, that last, it's been cracking, and then it finally breaks loose and everything comes rushing through. That seems to be the way some people have described it. Even in my own life, with other family members that are really struggling with their physical health, and really, really losing I would say heart and losing their will in some ways, because it's so painful and it's so uncomfortable and it doesn't seem like it'll ever end. And even they turned a corner, it feels like, in the last day or so, where they started to perk up a little bit and get a little spring in their step. And so there's this idea that we are supposed to, when we practice these modalities, especially some sort of energy work or natural means, we expect that it's going to take away our symptoms, and then that is some measure of, that there is success, that there is healing. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it is going through the process, and you have to feel in a very physical way the discomfort and the pain of this process that we are going through. And even doing the things are going to assist and enhance your body. It's just like getting sick, right? Your immune system turns up your thermostat, and your thermostat getting turned up means that everything is running higher, right? And so you get a fever, you have the body aches, you have maybe you have gastrointestinal issues, and we want to suppress these symptoms, but in fact it is the symptoms that are just a reflection of your body's immune system running at a higher rate in order to do what you want it to do. And I feel like that a lot of people energetically, in a very, very expedited way, have recently been going through this. So if you are struggling in this way physically, and it doesn't have to be physical, but I feel like energetically it's coming down to that point where we are experiencing things in the physical now very directly. And if you have been struggling with this in a very physical way, chances are things may have shifted for you very recently. And if it's not physical, and maybe it's psychological, maybe it's mental, maybe it's emotional, it's certainly energetic. No matter what, there has been a shift, right? And there's been a changing of the tide. And as we're going to see in this transmission today, that is certainly going to lead us into a moment where we have a lot of perception and sensitivity in our mind, right? Mercury has moved into Libra today. Mercury has moved out of Virgo, which is the sign of the healing process, by the way. The actual process of healing, not the state of health, but the mutable moving things around in purification. Now that Mercury, the realm of our mind and our nervous system, right, rules our nervous system, has come out of its house of rulership, which is the sixth house, which is Virgo, right? The alchemical process in some ways is now moved into Libra, right? The form of perfect balance. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more with the astrology. But along with the third quarter square, we have this massive Draco activation, and the tendency with the Draco in general, right? Let's just take the starseed portion out of it here for 1 second, because that's a whole other level. But the tendency here is the limbic system and the reptilian brain is so ancient and old, and it really does reflect back onto our ability to survive, instinctual survival. And the power of the serpent medicine is the Kundalini. And we've, this is something that I've talked about so many times, that if we do not have a purified, devoted vessel in which this energy can be released and move through us, there are a lot of different ways it can manifest. Psychotic breaks is one of them, right? You have a flash opening of your third eye that you are not ready for. And this is not to say that you've done anything wrong, or that that there's something wrong with that. It's just showing you that your body is not ready, right? And your mind is not ready for what has transpired. And I feel like that the time for that getting ready is really coming to an end, which is why a lot of these physical symptoms and upgrades have been expedited, and they seem so painful, and they seem so troubling, and so almost beyond what we can handle, seemingly, right? But it's really just to get us up to speed energetically, right? Because the solar weather's coming in stronger, right? The magnetic field continues to be weakened in its preparation for its eventual flip. The incredible amount of energy coming into our grid system as a planet, it just keeps increasing. And we have to be ready to hold that at the highest level, right? And there is always the risk that our reptilian instinctual brain kicks in for us to survive, but then we are acting out of alignment with our higher self. And this is why, the Draco, for however you want to conceptualize it, either literal reptilians or as an archetypal representation of that part of ourselves, when it's strong in people, they tend to find themselves in positions of power, because self-preservation will lead you to act out in these ways. And we are all going to be up-leveled in this way. And the Draco starseeds are the ones right now who came in with this resonance intentionally in order to hold the line of alchemical transmutation, to not only do this themselves, but to model it for others, because it's so important that we do not allow our self-preservation to bring us back down into a lower vibrational state. And that is really, what we are dealing with on a global level, of course. And like I said, you can think about it as literal reptilian shapeshifters. It doesn't matter, because whatever you think about, whatever you imagine, you have the capacity to create. So it doesn't really matter if it's archetypal or if it's literal, in my opinion. Some people think it does matter, and that's their thing, right? That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is utilizing this symbolic reference to understand ourselves, to understand our shadow, and most importantly, how to hack our own shadow. Because if you want to not be taken over by this self-preservation type of energy, you have to learn how to hack your own shadow before that gets to you in the first place. So old motives, new purposes, right? There is everybody's in this process of being upgraded, and it really is up to each of us individually in our own process of how we're going to address this. And like I said, pain, really strong pain, right? Trauma, PTSD that, causes pain, physical pain will challenge every single person to preserve themselves. And this is when we have the choice of whether or not we're going to give in or not, right? And so it's been expressed in many different spiritual contexts. So, Buddha under the Bodhi tree, Jesus in the desert, right? All of those types of events express the same type of moment where we're offered relief and power, right? And a sense of power and control in exchange for our own sovereignty, right? And our own higher self-sovereignty, and to lower our vibration in order for us to gain that self-preservation. So if you're having these symptoms and it feels like there's no end in sight, there are lots of things you can do to help, I would say, manage them, and also to connect into your higher self so you can hold fast as you go through this upgrade, because it's substantial. And it's just, like I said, with the third quarter square of the moon and the sun in conjunction with Alpha Draconis today, this is a big Draco activation. And the moon is in conjunction with the Hyades star cluster. So we also have this strong feeling of expression. And fundamentally, we are being tasked with our ability to trust and to cooperate with the natural, the natural order of things, and that we will be provided for by nature, right? And the thumbnail picture that I have for this video is the well on my property. It's the old well. It's not they dug a new well since the first well 120 years ago. So, but it's the idea that you have to build the well. There has to be a structure here, right? Our consciousness can be that structure. There has to be, there's the bucket, there's the rope, there's the hand pump, however you want to look at it. So there it requires that we cooperate and participate in some way. But at the same time, we build it and the rain will come, right? We build the vessel and it will be filled with the water that we need, right? Which is in reference to our spirit. So there's a lot going on right now. Of course, Hurricane Ida is making landfall in New Orleans, in Louisiana, and so that's something to pay attention to, because things are just not always as we're being told that they are, and it's important that we also realize that too, because there's just something to be said for, I don't know what's going on there. So just pay attention, and maybe pay attention to some alternatives about what that situation looks like, because it's not always going to be exactly what you see on the mainstream. If you have contacts in that area, and like personal contacts, I would encourage you to reach out to them if you haven't already. I'm sure you have, and to find out what's actually going on the ground, because there's a lot to be gained in terms of self-preservation and control, to control all forms of narrative, right? Right. Okay, guys. So let's go into today's transmission. I want to check the chat real quick and see if anybody. Thank you, Paige. I knew that you would come through in terms of the sound. It took me all morning to get this dialed in, and I'm having to use a new program in order to balance out the sound. So I'm excited that it's working. I'm very fairly pleased that I figured it out on my own, actually. So a lot of this tech work is and broadcasting and streaming, I've had to teach myself. So that's a good reference to just about anything else in life, that you do have the capacity to learn how to do these new skills and these new types of skills and technical skills, which is a very Gemini thing, right? So I'm going to bring up the reading. I'm going to minimize myself here while we go through it. So we can see here that our tower is back. Oh boy. And I mean, this is not really that sorry guys, it's not really that surprising that we see the tower here as our outcome, or the impact or the potential effect of all of these things. But it's good to recognize, and when the tower is here. It does seem so destructive, but the reality is that it's the sudden breakout of realizations and the crumbling of false illusions, right? The tower references the Tower of Babylon, which was this intention to build a tower to heaven in a very physical way rather than doing it spiritually. And when that happens, the tower falls because the reality is that it's built. It's like castles made of sand, right? It's not very stable or steady, and the higher you build it, the more precarious it all becomes, and then it just falls over. And we realize we already have that ladder and that tower into our highest self already. It's already here. So let's start here. Our Ace of Cups. This is our causal factor. So many people, I feel like, have had an influx, and you can see here that this is literally a toroidal field, right? You have the two streams coming in from below and above, coming in that vertical axis of power, coming into the cup, and then it's kind of radiating around the whole thing in this kind of like wave pattern, right? And the cups are the water, the spirit, and it's the vessel that holds these things as well. So we see our causal factor, the ace, right? It's the source of love. It's the beginning of something. It's the desire for a relationship or connection in a emotional or spiritual way. And something that's really important to realize about this card as we look at this toroidal field, and this connects very much to the idea of hacking our own shadow. It goes back to Jungian psychology and depth psychology, and the idea of as above, so below, and that you have to acknowledge what is underneath, right? What is going on underneath, what is going on in the darkness, what is going on in your own shadow, the unacknowledged, the unconscious drives, the things that we don't consciously have an awareness of unless we do the work, right? And there's many ways to do this, right? This was, in fact, the role of the shaman, was to guide people into their own realm of the unconscious in order to hack their own shadow, in order to heal, right? Because that's where the healing really comes from. Isn't it interesting that Virgo, as the house, and the sixth house is the house of healing that comes about through a crisis, also is about going into the darkness of who you are, right? To go into the underground in order to utilize what is there and bring it back up, right? Through the root system. So we've talked about this before because it came up a lot stronger a couple weeks ago, that beauty and ugly are two poles together, right? As above, so below. You can't really grow the blossom, right? The lotus blossom without the roots going down through the murky water to find the soil at the bottom. And mud is needed to make them blossom, right? And so we come to this awareness not because it's all great, but because we have brought these two poles together within us in a spiritual way, in an emotional way, and we feel the beginning of something. So there's devotion, there is empathy here. And like I said, this is the source of love. And you have to differentiate. And the next card in the suit is, in fact, the Two of Cups, which is that differentiation. And it is the separation and the differentiation, the duality within ourselves even, that allows us to bring it back together. So we can't actually come together again in union without the separation that is is a part of this universe, of the third dimension, right? And it is these synthesis of these two poles that we then create something new. But we have to acknowledge that they're here together. And the shadow work and hacking your own shadow, I mean, this is not new, right? But just even the concept of shadow work is something that's been hijacked in order to keep people from truly acknowledging what it is that is going on under the surface and needs to be acknowledged so that you can understand what it is you're substantiating. And this is, in fact, is where Neptune has been. Neptune came into a direct conjunction with Pallas Athena, the asteroid. She is the goddess of wisdom and strategy. They came together at this point over the weekend, right, to show us the strategy that we need to employ within ourselves in order to substantiate a conscious ideal. And if our unconscious desires are part of that picture, in fact, we can't separate them. they're one and the same, right? As above, so below. And so we do now see that there is some measure of a new seed point spiritually and emotionally and feeling wise coming into this moment, that we have acknowledged the unconscious and the conscious are inseparable for each other, and we have to actually work with both poles in order to strengthen that field around us. If we want to radiate out in a strong field, we have to be able to know what is under the surface as much as what is above, okay? So this is going to express itself in a lot of different ways. It'll be unique to each person, and that's important because that's part of the Leo new moon cycle that we are still part of right now. This is the last week, the fourth lunar quarter, and the moon was, is going to get darker and darker and darker. She's in her waning phase, of course. So it's going to be unique to each person, but it is indicative that there is an acknowledgement on some level here. Okay, that as above, so below, and that we're each working with the so below just as much as the as above, right? And when we do that, we are so powerful, right? We can't be hacked at that point, but we have to acknowledge it. And that's really hard to do because we want to think that we have it all figured out, that we don't have any shadow left, that and it's really easy to externalize all of this and focus on everybody else and what their shadow is as well. And that is how our shadow has been hacked, right? That the focus, we have been guided and directed in some ways very subconsciously through propaganda, through emotional appeal, in order to externalize this process and focus on everybody else, when in fact if we focused on this process within ourselves, this is our power, right? This is how we become empowered. So coming into the moment here, we do see that there is the beginning of something new, and the emotional capacity gets massively larger as a result of this, and the field radiates that much stronger, but it does require that we acknowledge the beauty and the ugly are the same thing, two poles of the same thing. And it's pretty clear that it's going to keep getting more ugly on the outside, but you, of course, with the tower as our impact moment, right? This effect of this cause and effect relationship, it will pull down all of the illusions and delusions about all of this so that we can see that the beauty and the ugly are one and the same, and that we can't actually separate them. And in fact, we have to connect into both of them at the same time if we actually want to, strengthen that field around us. So as we come into the moment, we have this Ace of Cups, and here's our Queen of Swords. Now it's really focused on where we're going, right? And that's how it came out in the reading, and the direction that it's facing is the impact or the effect. So the Queen of Swords, right? This is us, right? These court cards represent us, and we see another queen in the reading here today, the Queen of Keys. So the divine feminine is pretty much here to facilitate this process. So the Queen of Swords is the mother of air. So you take a look at this picture. This individual is bare-chested, right? And so the heart is open, the chest is vulnerable. This individual is up, the queen, she is on her throne, but it's way up in the sky, right? So she's got this transcendent perspective here that is not grounded at all. It is the air of the water of the air. So we're missing fire and we're missing earth, and this is the Queen of Keys, is one of our guidance cards, is really important to keep in mind through this process, because we do need to stay grounded to the nuts and bolts of our reality here, while we also embody this strong dominance of intellect that sometimes has us raising above everything else, right? And you see that there's a head. It's pretty clear that she chopped off this head and is now holding it, right? Showing that it is her intellect, her perception, and her sensitivity to things that is able to really kind of chop off the ego in some ways, right? chop off the ego, but she is on her throne in the clouds. It is way above everything else, and she's not really grounded in reality. But at the same time, it does allow for this perspective that is so much wider than we would get when we're right on the ground, immersed in it. And in some ways, she is releasing our conscious mind and that ego structure from the rest of us so that we can feel into this. Now, something to consider is that not only is the moon going to be in a conjunction with Rahu, with her own lunar her own north node today, that means that she'll also be in opposition to the south node today, or Ketu. And that particular degree is about returning to the body, and that we can't process everything, and we certainly can't alchemize and transmute strictly from our mind and our intellect. And so even though the moon will be in opposition to this point, that tension there will be something that we can find a balance with, because we, like I said, we can't do it all through our minds, as much as Gemini would love that, right? This is where the North Node is. This is where the moon is in Gemini. We would love to just be this Queen of Swords and kind of just, in some ways, have this large, vast perspective, but at the same time, we do have to return to our body as well. And we'll see this as we go through the reading, how we can actually do that. So there's a lot of wisdom and imagination here when it comes to the Queen of Swords. We are very independent. We have freedom of mind and soul at this point, and it's really facing this tower moment, right? We do need to kind of embody this energy that is also very sensitive, right? The queen is the water again. And there's a lot of confidence here, self-confidence. Now, we run the risk of living in an idealistic world when we have the Queen of Swords, because she is on her pedestal in the clouds, way up above everything. So not feet on the ground. But the sensitivity and the emotional aspect is referenced by the fact that she is chopped off the head, right? And so we do kind of have to return to the rest of our body in some ways. And so this is the mother of air, right? And again, with the moon meeting Gemini, the Gemini North Node, the moon is in Gemini and meeting her own North Node today in Gemini, I would say that this is a really good representative of that, the Queen of Swords, right? And the fundamental trust and cooperation in natural living, in the natural world, right? The idea that we have to participate in some way in this process. But if we build it, we will, in fact, whatever the structure is, if there is a well, it will fill with water as long as there is water to fill it, right? And that is given to us by the natural world, right? We are not creating water. Although that I think that is, I do feel like that is happening in some other places. They're attempting to create actual water, but nature does it for us. So this is where we're at right now. This is the heart of the matter, this Queen of Swords. Now, here we are going into the Akashic Library. This is where what is going on in the subconscious, what is going on underneath the surface. Maybe we're not fully aware of it, but it is really active, and it is absolutely where we want to be energetically rooting ourselves, is the descent. You can see that there's a staircase going down. There's a librarian here. This person has a book open, and there are books everywhere. Every shelf has just books lined with it. There are rooms to go back into, and this person is waiting, right? He's waiting for us to come down and start investigating our own subconscious, our own unconscious, our own Akash, right? And that, what does that mean? Our past lives, multidimensional experiences. This is really relevant to the starseeds especially, but we all have multidimensional selves. It's not just certain people, we all do. It's just a matter of being aware of it or not. So we're moving deeper into the Akashic records. We are rooting ourselves, right? This is the ugly part, right? This is the as below, so below, I mean. This is the so below, right? Understanding your Akash, right? Where you've come from, what your lineage is, what your multidimensional experiences are, how they're impacting what's going on right now. So this is where we get the better understanding of what? Old motives and new purposes. We can acknowledge where we've been, acknowledge what we've experienced, how it's influencing us right now, and be a conscious co-creator of where we're going from here. But it does require that we actually step down the staircase into our own Akash. And this is very difficult when it comes to doing this work, right? And this is the work right now. This is the work. There are no easy outs. There are no bypassing anymore. And this is why many of us have gone through incredible physical transformation that has been very painful over the last couple of weeks, because we have been transmuting and creating space that needs to be created and that we have agreed to create on a higher level, and now we just had to go through it. And I'm really grateful that many people have finally turned a corner in some ways, because now it's going to get very interesting with these Draco activations. So it's also a time of heightened intuition. And of course, greater self-creation. When you understand your own Akash, then you are able to be, like I said, a conscious co-creator, right? You are not just rehashing all of these old patterns and templates energetically within you, but it does require that you go into the ugly, And for me, I'm just grateful that I initiated that process consciously through my own process. You can do whatever you want. I mean, even if you're just attuned to Reiki, you can commit to a process of 21 days of daily treatments, right? You can a process of 21 days of daily prayer, 21 days of daily meditation, 21 days of daily, whatever your process is, yoga, going hiking out in the woods, tending your garden, something very specific though that you can do. But this is where we can root ourselves. Now, where we can really release our energy, the as above, is balance. The 7 of forces, right? Now, something to acknowledge here is that this is representative of a time of harmony and balance, right? And Mercury has moved into Libra. Venus is already here, right? That Queen of Swords, she's been here. And is in, she's moving into now the last decan of Libra, which is, unfortunately is the 5 of Swords, is the third decan of Libra. No, that's not true. It's the 4th. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The 4 of Swords is that Jupiter in Libra. It's the respite, right? It's coming to that balance. And we saw that last week, actually. So the 7 of forces is balance, right? Time of harmony and balance. And it's letting us know that we are seeking to achieve balance. And this is where we can really put our attention and our energy as above, right? To seek balance and to be patient and to pay attention to the details of things, right? There's a lot of details here. There's a lot of details in the paperwork, right? And it's important that we continue to be aware of our thoughts and actions, because they actually do have an impact. So something to keep in mind is that justice and reciprocity are energetic, right? When we see them out in the physical, it's because they've already found energetic balance in some way. And so in terms of the work we're doing on ourselves, it's important that we are acknowledging that it is energetic, and we want to find that energetic balance and fairness within ourselves. And there's a sense here that we want to do this. This is where we can really release our energy. This is our conscious awareness is on balance. And with the Akashic Library is the root, right? As above, so below, right? If we want to find balance and want to release that into our conscious awareness, our thoughts, our attention, into our contribution to society, we also have to acknowledge that we have to find balance within ourselves by going into the ugly, going into the Akash, going into the darkness, in order to see what's going on there and acknowledge it for what it is. Because if we don't acknowledge it, then somebody else uses it. And this has been the message of Neptune retrograde in Pisces for weeks now. And soon it's going to move out of this degree, and it's going to be a different story entirely. We're going to be actually bringing some great peak experience into real life, right? But before that happens, we're going to go through this tower moment, which is, again, the the sudden breakout of realization and the destruction of old values, of course. So losing the old fortress of our beliefs makes room for the new, and this is very painful. It's been physically painful. As I've said many times already, people have had to physically have their container stretched, and it's like growing pains when you're going through puberty, especially people who grew a lot in a very short amount of time. It's very physically painful, right? Your ribs hurt, your bones hurt. And so on an energetic level, people have been just sustaining an incredible amount of higher vibrating energy, right, in their body, and it's been stretching so much. So, but when we lose the old fortress of our beliefs, we make room for the new. Again, right, it is understanding our old motives and new purpose. But we're going to have to accept that this tower and the agent of the tower, which is Mars, where is Mars? Mars is in Virgo right now, right? Mars in Virgo is certainly able to work with that energy, the healing, right? It gives us courage and it gives us the ability to go into the darkness. But as we come into the last decan of Virgo, it is training us to work together, right? It's still a very personal and individual experience, but it is starting to train us to work together. And that's something that Mars is going to struggle with a little bit. So part of this process, before we can even acknowledge that, is this tower moment that's coming, and it's the will to change our old ways. We have to embrace embrace it, right? Otherwise it's just blind destruction and we don't understand it. So even when we have the will to change our own ways or old ways, just like I said with the metamorphosis, when it was initiated, that was it. You just make the initiation, you take the step, and then what unfolds as a result may not be like exactly what you want it to be on the outside, but it is in fact making room for the new to come in. So, I mean, certainly some really disruptive energy on the way, especially, like I said, with this Draco activation. This is where we're really going to see people for who they are, because if you cannot transmute this energy of the tower specifically, then self-preservation kicks in, and you just kind of like shift back down into a lower vibe, and you're not actually getting anything out of the situation. So it's important to just be mindful of this as you move through your day, through your time, through all of your experiences, your dreams. Ooh, boy, oh boy. Okay, so we'll go into let's go into our guidance here. The Four of Roses. Okay, views of the ego. My friends, oftentimes when you get this card, it will signal that somebody else is this kind of narcissistic, conceited person, but this is us, okay? This is important that we are acknowledging our own view of ourselves in the mirror, right? How is it that we are not seeing the other people involved? How is it that we are thoughtless and selfish people? And we're not trying to flog ourselves here. This is not what this is about. It's about being very honest with ourselves and seeing where this situation is showing up in our lives. And we are not acknowledging that other people are part of our life or surrounding us, or it doesn't even have to be other people. These could be other aspects that surround our ego, right? You can see that there are two aspects and there are three people, right? That's a very magical, stable, harmonious number is the 3. But if we don't acknowledge that and we just see our ego, right, which is self-preservation, right? This is the ego protects the psyche, right? It's not like you squash your ego. That's ridiculous. Like, that's not actually possible at all. Like, that's a misnomer, and I think is another way that all of this process has been kind of hijacked in some way, and certainly misunderstood. It's more about acknowledging this part of yourself so that it's not being hijacked and you are not letting it run the show. So, this person is self-absorbed and only makes plans based on the ego. And again, it's important that we realize this, and that goes so below, right? We have to go into that space and see that part of ourselves. And, our higher self has tolerated this version of ourselves being in the driver's seat for far too long. And it's time for us to see the other aspects of ourselves in the mirror and stop like letting the ego drive entirely. And this is really difficult work. And a lot of people think they already have this figured out. And especially if they're spiritual teachers or anything of that nature. And so we all have this work to do. Every single person alive right now has this work to do, regardless of how, what kind of work you're doing. It's important that you are aware of this. So this is guidance, right? This is not chastising any of us. This is just guidance that we have to be aware of when this is functioning. And with the Draco activation, this is really important because that's the type of stuff that leads to people exploiting and disempowering others in order to empower. It's not even empower, to take power from others. And when we look at the boar, right? The boar, it says, face your problems head on with confidence and courage. You will emerge victorious. Well, yeah, don't be afraid to look at the shadow of yourself. Don't be afraid to look at what is going on under the surface, the ugly parts. Dig in, rummage around, and then take steps to fix it, right? You don't have to get totally obsessed with it, but you also don't want to not acknowledge this part of ourselves, right? And this is deep, difficult work. I mean, this can really trigger a lot of things. So you have to be aware of that as well as you embark on these darker parts of yourselves. But this is saying just face it head on. Confidence, courage, that's Mars right there. Mars, the agent of the tower. Mars, who's in Virgo, as this devoted warrior to this process. Utilize that energy of courage and determination and face this rather than doubling down and really setting yourself up. And we all, like I said, we all have to do this. I'm not saying that, this is not like you. This is all of us, right? This is coming through so strong. I can't even tell you how many personal confirmations that I have gotten in the last 2 days about this Draco thing that's going to be very, very telling. So the seagull at the top here, so we want to find balance, right? We want to find balance. We want to express ourselves through this balance, this reciprocal, energetic reciprocity of justice. But it's about healing, deep emotional healing, right? Now, here is the Hyades starseed element of the moon in Gemini as well, right? Express your emotions in order to heal them. You're not going to indulge them, right? You don't want to stay in that victim narrative, but you also don't want to completely bypass them either, right? The seagull is flying over the ocean, right? And so at times the seagull dips in, right, and grabs whatever it needs for sustenance. It can't really live very far away. I mean, it does, they come inland quite a bit in order to feed themselves. But I have a feeling that has to do with the fact that, human action and activity minimizes their access to what they would normally do to sustain themselves. But this is a time for deep emotional healing. This is where the balance really comes from. And so the Hyades starseeds, especially with Rahu in conjunction with the Hyades, and we've talked about this already so many times, you have to let the emotions move through you. They have to come up and out, right? You have to come up and out. We can't hold on to them, but we can't also leave them under the surface, right? We can't leave them under the surface. What's the point? You have to dip in and get what you need and bring it back out. And so don't be afraid to express it, right? And this is how we're going to find balance, is to allow this part of ourselves to be healed. This is very, very difficult, especially if you have severe trauma, right? Or if you have, and trauma can be expressed in so many different ways, but we want to be able to express it. We want it to move through us, and we want to fundamentally trust that if we allow this to happen, if we put the bucket into the well, we will be able to pull up what we need, right? And this is going to be how we really find balance. And of course, the Queen of Keys is here to help balance things out as well, right? We want to be confident in our own bodily autonomy and authority. We want to be able to celebrate the success of other people. We want to acknowledge that other people being happy and confident in their own bodily autonomy is not going to take away from us. Ooh, that's a big one. Wow, that just came through really strongly. When it comes to bodily autonomy, people making decisions about their own bodily autonomy, whatever it is not, it really won't impact your own decisions, right? And if we are really, truly feeling confident and grounded and, in fact, a sense of authority over ourselves, what other people choose to do about their own bodily autonomy has nothing, it's not that it doesn't have anything to do with us. And this is where we've been really misled, I think, collectively, in how we've gotten to this point. People, and continue, that, this is a narrative that has continued, that this is not the case, that it does affect other people. And on some level, I'm sure it does, but at the end of the day, if you are grounded, if you are confident in your bodily autonomy, in your authority over your own personhood, what other people do won't actually impact that. And that's something that, again, the deep emotional healing and the reciprocity that comes out of the Seven of Forces is really important. And we have to get into these deeper levels in order to even see this part and have some courage to look at ourselves in the mirror and be like, damn, I have been just totally wrapped up in myself, in my own trajectory here. And either way you look at it, no matter what, we are going to have this sudden breakout of illusion, and the old forms, our flimsy tower is coming down. And that's not, and the destruction of our old values. So, and a big part of this Libra energy with Mercury coming into Libra today is about the perfect form, right? The perfect form of balance. And we have the capacity right now in this moment with Mercury here to conceptualize this through our minds. And with the moon in Gemini, meeting Rahu, her own North Node, and trusting what is provided for us, our consciousness can really expand and grow as a result of that. So let's look at the astrology for today, of course, to see how this was supported. And, I talked about this astrology with, like I said, the fourth lunar quarter astrology report that is up on all of the platforms. Whatever platform you're watching this on, that report is going to be there. So here we are on the 30th of August. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's already the 30th of August. And tomorrow is the 31st, and then Wednesday will be the 1st of September. So, and then there'll be new moon. Oh, speaking of new moon, just remember that I am still offering that flash sale. I'm going to be doing all of the ones that have been booked this so far. They're going to be coming out this week. So if you want a lunar transit reading, if you want to look at the lunar cycle that starts with our new moon on the 6th, which is Labor Day here in the United States, which is a new moon in Virgo. It is a Syrian starseed activation as well. So if you want to get a lunar transit reading, I'm offering a flash sale. They're $44. You get a recording that is all about your natal chart in reference to this upcoming lunar transit. And so it's not just the lunar cycle, but all of the transits that have to do with this next lunar cycle. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you a preview right now. The next new moon in October is happening, the Libra new moon is happening on the very day that Pluto stations direct. So this is a really important new moon right now. September is the time. So if you want to get a sense of what areas of your life this most likely will impact, if there's any starseed markings that are being activated for you, this flash sale right now is a really good way to do that. So here we go, August 30th. We are looking at our moon in Gemini, as I said. Oh, let me bring up my notes here real quick. Here we go. All right, guys. Where did we go? All right, so let's go back in the Wayback Machine here just to look at how everything is unfolding. So, like I said, we already talked about Mercury is now in Libra, the perfect form. And it's really the time that we it's consecrated to the seed, because it's the seed that the fruit of the tree or the plant or whatever surrounds. It is the fruit that bears the seed for the next cycle. So everything that we do during Virgo time, whether it be healing, whether it be commitment to discipleship on any level, devotion, service, it's really growing us as the bearers of the next cycle by then coming into perfect form of relationship. So Libra, when we come to the equinox, when the sun comes into Libra, that is the autumn equinox, is the harvest, right? And it's the harvest that we move from Virgo to Libra, and it is the balancing of the scales of the harvest, right? That we see here what it is that we have reaped what we sow, and we get to see where it stands on the balance, right? On the scales of balance. So Mercury is now here, and so we have this capacity to conceptualize this. Venus is already in Libra, is moving into, right now she's moving into the 17 to 18 degree of Libra as well today. So she is going to be, like I said, she's going to eventually be moving into that last decan, but right now she is really working with, the reconstruction of the boat launch, right? It's a tenuous link between the unconscious and the conscious mind, and we have to really put some time into balancing that out. Again, as above, so below, right? We can't get caught in one place or the other. We have to make sure that they stay linked, because that's really the source of our individual sovereign power. But before that happened, though, we see here that the moon then, so that happened, and then the moon came into the conjunction with Rahu directly. This was last night, early this morning, and so again, the fundamental cooperation. So we're really feeling it within us. Are we going to be able to cooperate as well as trust that everything that we need is going to be presented to us? Hold on one second. All right, guys, there we go. So, and as we know with Rahu, the lunar north node, this is the trajectory of our soul's evolution. It is the head of the dragon. It is, in fact, pulling us. Now, think about that for 1 second. The head of the dragon, the Draco constellation, right? Now, Alpha Draconis is in the tail, right, which provides the momentum moving forward, but is also the direction we are heading away from. So the head of the dragon really can have us be a little bit obsessed. So we also do have to recognize as that obsession might start to may have presented itself, and very likely through our dream state. I know that it did for me. Oh man, I'm not going to share that dream because that's for me. But I will tell you that this showed itself very, very directly to me, which is why I speak so strongly about all of this, because I know as a Draco starseed what the temptation is, right? And the temptation is to become obsessed with this trajectory. So just like a dragon and its treasure, right? So we have to be mindful of that, right? The treasure, we have to make sure we know what our treasure is. And our treasure really is our soul's evolution. And as long as we acknowledge that and we stay true to that, then I think we'll be okay. So this really surfaced for us individually as the moon crossed her own north node, made it very made us very intuitively aware of it in our dreams, right? In our subconscious, in that emotional landscape, it came forward. Now, we also are seeing, so it conjunct Rahu, then the third quarter square of the sun and the moon, right? This, come back. Here we go. So right after that, we have Mercury coming into the perfect form of balance in a mental way, in the way that we conceptualize the world around us, giving us our nerve, our actual nervous system, the function of our minds. Now we have this square right here with the with the moon as well. And so our third quarter square is always about this crisis in consciousness. And the moon is a very transient experience, right? Just like our feelings shift and change all the time. These connections with the sun and the moon represent a moment, a fixed point in time where we have an experience of these two polarities within us at cross purposes with each other. And on the waning moon, it's about the crisis in consciousness because of what we've seen with the full moon, what came to our awareness, right? What was reflected back to us from the sun that usually is within us and hidden. So again, we're still in the Hyades starseed territory here with the moon in Gemini. And as it comes into its 8th degree, the 7 to 8 degree mark here, it is about the arousal of the consciousness in response to what is unbalanced. We've gone from this moment of like, of balance with fundamentally trusting and cooperating with nature to gather what it is that that sustains us spiritually, right? With the water in the well. And then as you move forward, there is an arousal. There is a movement of energy and emotion through us in response to an imbalance, right? And that's the thing about Gemini, is that it's always about the back and forth, because that is the nature of our consciousness, is this duality of as above, so below. And when we recognize that there is some aspect of one of these poles that is out of balance, we will be aroused emotionally and in our consciousness and in our thoughts, especially with the moon here, definitely emotionally, to come out and revolt in some way, to speak out, to express ourselves in the face of this imbalance. Now, the square, now that seems pretty cut and dry, right? And you can see how this is unfolding itself right now in a lot of ways around the world in relation to things that have to do with bodily autonomy specifically. But we also see here that the sun in conjunction with Draconis in this particular degree is the idea here that there's new potentials open to us, but it's still managed by some framework of tradition and cultural lineage, right? And let's see here. It's like a child, like a young child taking their first dancing lesson, right? And dancing is an expression of rhythm in our body, right? It's our ability to directly connect to rhythm in our body, and it's very intuitive, but it's just like music, right? It's both halves of the brain interacting with different things. Like there's technical skill that has to do with dancing, but a child is just coming to learn what it even means in the first place. So we're learning to use our capacity for emotional self-expression according to cultural standards, right? Now, this is the sun. This is the sun. This is how we express ourselves. This is the person we are on the outside, whereas the moon is how we feel on the inside. There's a process of emotional experiencing that is under controlled situations. Is being shown now to demand active movement, right? So the individual can express their own individual character, but only according to this framework, right? This is going to change over the next couple of days. We're going to see the sun in a quincunx to Saturn that's going to throw this all out the window in that moment. But for now, the individual consciousness, even though we're learning to use the capacity for our emotional self-expression, we're still entirely responsible to the concept of the guru. And it's a loaded term, and I'm using it loosely in terms of how the guru represented the mirror, right? The mirror back to us of who we are through all kinds of different ways. Through the process of teaching and challenging in a lot of ways. So new perspectives are now open, right? So this is where we find ourselves in a moment here. How do we mitigate this very powerful emotional self-expression that is still very young? Right? This is the Kundalini opening, right? And we're learning to use it, but we have the guidance and the we're still under the responsibility and the tutelage of a teacher or a guru or some sort of framework here. Because otherwise, we will just find ourselves just like all over the place. And so this moment here with this crisis in consciousness is really going to challenge us to find that framework. And again, many people have been going through an incredibly challenging time right now, creating space within themselves in order to hold this much higher vibrational energy, and just now stepping out into it. And again, if we do not acknowledge the so below, then we find ourselves not really listening to the teacher, right? Not allowing the teacher that has and I'm not saying like literal a teacher like me or some other spiritual teacher. It's more about if we allow the Kundalini, for instance, to come through without the guidance of some framework here, then we risk that, we risk breaking a leg. Oh my God, it's not really that dramatic, but it could be. It really could be, right? The child is and also the child is trusting, and that's the other thing. We don't. Who is it that we're trusting? What framework is it that is providing the teaching of this new style of interacting with the world and rhythm and vibration, right? Again, dancing is the rhythm in our body and expressing it. So the moon will move past this point, but the sun will be here all day. So in this degree. So that's something to keep in mind too, that the moon in that moment will have us very aroused to express. And the sun is saying, let's learn to use our capacity for this self-expression in a way that actually is based on something that's been taught and provided. Now, that's not to say we have to be very aware of what is a functional set of dancing lessons and what isn't. And so new perspectives are open, right? Old motives, new purposes. We have to be very aware of all of these things as we go through this time, okay? So what else do we have? As we go through today's astrology. Let's see here. Now, so the moon, speaking of Saturn, and speaking of wounding of self is Chiron. So the moon then comes into a trine with Saturn in its retrograde in Aquarius. And this is, again, where we find some really strong support as we feel this potentially aggressive, but also assertive and masterful ability to grab the arrow out of the quiver and hit the bullseye in the middle. And this Saturn in its retrograde here is about the seer becoming the doer, right? It's one thing to acknowledge the perfect form of something. It's quite another to act out the vision. It's one thing to have the vision. It's another to actually put it into action. And Saturn is really challenging all of us, giving us the backbone within ourselves, our inner scaffolding, in order to do this. Now, this is going to be relevant as the sun comes into a quincunx with the very same Saturn tomorrow. So the expression of the self and the ability to hit that bullseye, right? To penetrate and to go through our own ego to get to something. It's a very Zen type of thing when it comes to archery, right? To get through all of the shit on the outside and get right to the heart of the matter in our mind through our mental faculties. And when it comes to the moon, it's going to be something that's going on in our subconscious mind, right? It's going to find a lot of support and a lot of traction and won't require much participation. So that's something to keep in mind too, that this could still be very unconscious if we are not aware. And we may act out our vision based on something in our subconscious that we're not even aware of. So that third quarter square, that crisis in consciousness, is really important to harness, so that when we come into this trine today, which has already happened, right, 7:50 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, that we have made the best of it. We have made the most use of it in a very conscious and very awake type of way. And then from there, the moon then comes into its sextile with Chiron retrograde in Aries, very fiery, of course. And here's the sextile. So if we have been able to hit the bullseye, right? If we're able to really get to the center of what is going on in our subconscious, in our feelings, in that emotional landscape, and Saturn is providing the scaffolding in some ways for us to act out the vision of whatever that is for us. We can take that work and that energy, that the practice and the technical skill that we've acquired, and we can apply and invest that into the healing of this Chiron wound, right? Which consistently has been bringing us back to this place over and over and over again, that things are not happening in the way that fast enough, right? We want to have an immediate change to the status quo, and that's not how growth happens, right? Now, on a higher dimensional level, yes, surely, but we're dealing with 3D right now, and we're dealing with us in 3D. So regardless of how 5D you think you are, you're still in a physical body, and you're still here to be part of the process of making the transition from a physical body into that place. So right now, we can take the technical skill that we have acquired for ourselves in our mind, in our conceptualization, right? Gemini is about technical skill, right? It's about acquisition of knowledge. It's about reason. It's about practicing, right? It's about rote repetition in some ways, but it's about that technical skill. And we can take that technical skill, we can exhibit it in some sort of performance, and then we can apply that to where Chiron is and heal this wound, to acknowledge this wound that we may be acting out. We may be acting out this need for something to happen faster than it's meant to happen, right? It's like adolescent frustration, right? How many people couldn't wait? How many people as an adolescent couldn't wait to be an adult because they thought that, everything was going to be so much better when that was the case, right? There's frustration there. There's frustration that you can't get to where you want to go, where you are going, because you are still in this other state of growth. And Chiron there is just making it so much more of a wounded healer type of situation, right? Where we keep reinforcing the victim or savior narrative to somehow deal with this feeling of frustration. What we can do is, if we have done this work on really acknowledging, the arousal of our expression, but also having it be directed appropriately, then we can apply that. We can invest that into where Chiron is, and vice versa, right? This frustration, we can harness that potential energy and invest it into our own, not the development of this skill, but the performance of it. That's what I'm trying to say. The performance of it to inspire other people, right? When we do this work on ourselves and the way that we express it, we can inspire other people to do the same. And again, this is all about each of us doing this work on the inside rather than trying to externalize it into somebody else's responsibility. Yes, people do things that violate basic human rights. There are people who do things that violate our own code of ethics and our own cosmic law and our own human law, right? And we have a framework in order to address that. That's what justice is. And if people aren't holding up even that, then that's a problem too. And I'm not suggesting that we don't address these things, but we all have to address them within ourselves first so that we can then be uncorrupted agents of justice in its outward manifestation. Okay. So that's gonna do it for the transits for today. Let's move in tomorrow, just real quick. Like I said, the sun is going to be in a quincunx to Saturn in Aquarius in its retrograde. And, this degree is about really uniquely expressing ourselves where the sun is in Virgo, regardless, right? It's like being an expressionist painter. Like, there's no form here. It's just you being exactly who you are. And you can see that we are going to have to adjust ourselves in the face of a very strong boundary around ourselves. And it's like we can't... You know, there is a skeleton, right? There are bones, there's scaffolding, there's a structure, there is an actual, like, you know, internalized framework that Saturn represents within each of us that we have to acknowledge and that we can't really get around. But at the same time, like, it does give us the backbone in order to do this transmutational work, right? The seer becomes the doer. We act out the vision that we have within us, right? The manifestation comes from the energetic resonance and then becomes something physical. And it's not to say that we shouldn't express ourselves for who we are, right? That's where the adjustment's going to come from, is the squaring of the circle in this situation. We also see that the moon will come into a quincunx with Pluto, right, in late Gemini as well. And so we'll go over that more specifically tomorrow. But the big transit for tomorrow, the main one, other than all of the moon transits that are happening while the moon is in Gemini still, is going to be this quincunx. And so, again, it's important that we are acknowledging these parts of ourselves within and really seeing them for what they are, so that when we do express ourselves uniquely, that we are actually participating in alchemical transmutation and utilizing the scaffolding within us to actually give us the backbone to bring the vision into action, right? And this is one of those times where Saturn is actually working for us in a way that's not like, you know, sometimes Saturn is like, you know, the paternal figure that sets the boundaries, and we're like, I don't want to, you know, I'll do what I want, right? And that's where the sun's going to be. I'll do what I want, regardless of any framework that you give me. So there's going to be a need to alchemically transmute this connection when it comes into exact tomorrow. So that's pretty exciting, but also is a lot on our plate right now, isn't it? So guys, that's going to be it for today's transmission. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for the feedback about the sound. I do appreciate that as well. I'm going to be uploading another video here soon, just a short video about, well, I'll just wait till I upload it and you'll see, but it'll be something relevant to right now. And if you're, like I said, if you're interested in a reading, especially that lunar transit flash sale, you can go to my website, catalystenergies.net. That's in the description box below. And I love you. I appreciate each and every one of you so much. Take very good care of yourselves, and I'll see you tomorrow for the transmission. Have a great day. Bye.